In this segment, we're going to introduce integers and become familiar with integer chips and see a little bit about some of the terminology that goes along with integers and why some of that terminology can be somewhat confusing with students. So we might want to introduce the idea of integers starting with a number line. And our number line starts at 0 and goes up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and on and on. That's why we have the arrow over on the right-hand side. And if we were to start by adding 1 to our 0, we might want to put a little marker, something that looks like that. And so there's our yellow chip. And I've just, for ease of understanding, I put a positive sign in it. Everyone uses chips differently. Sometimes they come in different colors. Sometimes they're red and yellow. Sometimes they're blue and red. Sometimes they're green and red. Sometimes they're green and white. So they come in lots of different colors. So since everyone's using different materials, I'm just going to make sure that we're all aware. So for me, yellow is going to be positive, so I'm put the big positive signs on there. So if we added another one to what we had, I need to put another one over there. And as we add another one, I put another one over there. And so what does this symbol here mean? What does add 1 or plus 1 or positive 1 or gain 1? All of these things mean the same thing. They're all talking about the positive nature, that it's a growing kind of idea, and that we're adding things to the right-hand side of the number line. Now, depending on what grade we're introducing this to, most students at the earlier grades are into number lines. They usually have them on their walls in their room, and they are counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, and every time we add 1, then they get used to counting. Question is, what happens when we start taking things away? So now we're sitting here at positive 3, or we have 3 things on the positive side of our number line, and if we want to take something away, how do we indicate that we want to take something away? Well, this symbol here, -1, can tell us that. Now, I've said -1, but this symbol out in front, this little subtraction sign, negative sign, has many different meanings, and it can be interpreted many different ways, and this leads to some confusion for students. So it could be a -1, it could be a subtract 1, it could mean a -1, it could mean a take away 1. All of those things talk about the same idea. It could be the opposite of a 1 instead of a positive 1. And normally when we write 1s, we're kind of lazy, so we don't put a positive or negative. So normally we just write 1. So this would be the opposite of a 1, or the inverse of a 1. So all these terms can be used, which makes it confusing for students. So let's just say that we're going to call it take away 1 for now. So if I want to take away 1, I'm going to take away 1, and now I'm down to 2. If I take away a 1 again, I'm down to 1. If I take away 1 again, I'm down to 0. What would happen if I take away 1 now? Now, depending on what grade you're in, some students will say, well, if I don't have any, I can't take anything away. But this is an opportunity now to talk about, well, what happens if I say I owe you 1? I want to take 1 away, but you don't have it now, so you owe me 1 later. So this is another reason why negatives could have been invented or were invented. And so if I subtract 1 from that 0, I'm going to be found using our pattern. We went from 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 1 to 0. I'm going to end up here. What is it called? So if I want to do that now, I took away 1, and so now I'm at this thing. This take away 1, or -1, or -1. So as far as the chips go, how do I indicate that I have one of these 1s but on the other side? Well, I'm going to use one of these chips. It's a red chip instead of a yellow chip, and it's got a negative sign in it indicating that I'm on this left side of the number line. If I want a -1 from here now, and I want a -1 going to the left, I'm going to end up here at what we call -2 or -2. And therefore, I would need another one of these on this side. And if I was to subtract 1 again, that means I'm going to move from here to here. I'm going to move over to the left now. I'm now going to be at -3, and I would need to have 3 of these on this side of the number line. So the idea of this plus symbol meaning going to the right, or we're adding, the negative symbol or the minus symbol meaning that we're going to the left, and that we have positive items on the right hand side and negative items on the left hand side is an important concept that we need to introduce. Another really important visual for helping students to understand integers is the idea of a teeter-totter. So we have our number line, we have our positive items over here, and this number line just doesn't have the plus signs, but these are our positive items over here, and over here we have our negative items in this direction, and we want to make sure that we're counting away from our 0. So even though our numbers go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this direction, they don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the same direction. It's distance away from 0, so up 1 or we go down 1, up 2 or down 2. So we always want to make sure that we're counting away from our 0, just like we were counting away from our 0 in this direction. The other thing we can produce is a number line, and with this number line it can be like a teeter-totter. And one of the ideas of talking about addition is talking about how many we have on our teeter-totter. But before we get to talking about addition, I really want to make sure we understand a very, very important concept that is necessary for using the chips when we're talking about integers. It's the 0 pair. So if I have 1 positive on this side and 1 negative on this side, most students are familiar with teeter-totters, and they know that if we have the same number of things on both sides of my teeter-totter at the same distance away from the beginning of my teeter-totter, this teeter-totter is going to stay balanced. But if all of a sudden I added a whole bunch more of these on this side, my teeter-totter is no longer going to stay balanced. My teeter-totter is now going to tip down towards the negative side. And conversely, if I had a lot more positives on this side, my teeter-totter is going to tip this way. So the idea of how many positives and how many negatives determining if we're going to have a teeter-totter tipping one way or the other is fairly intuitive to students, and is important when we go to talk about our addition in our next segment. The one I really want to make sure we understand is if we have 1 positive and 1 negative, nothing really happens. If I put another one here and another one here, we're still balanced. And this is this idea of pairs, and that these two together basically produce what's called a 0 pair. They're equal distance away, they're 1 above and 1 below the 0, they balance each other out, so that produces a 0 pair is what we call it. And a 0 pair doesn't really change how my teeter-totter works at all. If I have another 0 pair, here's my other 0 pair, and again, nothing really changes, and therefore my teeter-totter stays the same. So we want to make sure that students understand positives are on this side of the number line, negatives are on this side of the number line. It's growing from the 0, and it's shrinking or growing in a negative direction away from the 0. And we want to make sure that they understand the idea of what a 0 pair is. In our next segment, we'll talk about using this symbol of the number line as a teeter-totter and the 0 pairs to help us figure out how to do addition.